Rebirth isn't a gift. It is a loaded gun. $50 million destroyed my previous existence, ending with my own flesh and blood plunging a kitchen knife into my chest while my fiancé watched. Waking up 24 hours before the drawing changed everything. I didn't hide the golden ticket this time. Instead, I carefully placed it right where her greedy hands could snatch it. Let her have the millions. Let her have the mansion. Let her deal with the cartel. Cold sweat drenched Cherry's thin cotton nightgown as she bolted upright in bed. Gasping for air, her hands frantically clawed at her chest, searching for the gaping wound that had ended her life just moments ago. Smooth, unblemished skin met her trembling fingertips. Panic gave way to severe disorientation. Sunshine filtered through the cheap, cracked blinds of her cramped bedroom, casting dusty golden stripes across the faded floral duvet. Gasping, Cherry threw her legs over the edge of the mattress, her bare feet hitting the cold linoleum floor. Her eyes darted to the digital clock resting on the nightstand. October 14th, 2024, 7:30 a.m. Bile rose in her throat. Exactly 24 hours before the drawing. 24 hours before the $50 million jackpot would destroy her life. Memories of her previous life hit her with the force of a freight train. She remembered winning the lottery. She remembered the sheer, unadulterated joy that had blinded her to the predators lurking in her own home. She had trusted her older sister, Bianca, to help her manage the sudden influx of wealth. She had trusted her fiancé, Lorenzo, to protect her. Instead, they had conspired in the shadows. They had drained her accounts, forged her signature on a myriad of legal documents, and when she finally uncovered their massive web of deceit, Bianca had driven a 6-inch blade into her ribs. Lorenzo had simply stood there, checking his Rolex as she bled out on her own expensive mahogany floor. Tears of rage pricked Cherry's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. Crying was for victims, and she refused to be a victim twice. Rising from the bed, Cherry walked over to the cracked vanity mirror. The woman staring back at her looked exhausted, worn down by years of working double shifts at the diner to support Bianca's aspiring acting career and Lorenzo's endless string of failed startup companies. Her brown hair was dull, her cheekbones hollow, but behind her hazel eyes, a new, sharp fire burned. "You want the money so badly, Bianca?" Cherry whispered to her reflection, a slow, dark smile creeping across her face. "You can have it. Every cursed penny." What Bianca and Lorenzo never knew in the previous life was the dark secret tied to their deceased father, Arthur Mitchell. Arthur hadn't died of a sudden heart attack. He had been taken out by Victor Rossi, a ruthless underground loan shark, over a $10 million gambling debt. The debt had died with him, or so the Rossi syndicate claimed, unless the Mitchell family suddenly came into a massive, public fortune. In her past life, Cherry had received a terrifying visit from Rossi's enforcers the day after claiming her prize. She had quietly paid off the $10 million plus exorbitant interest to save her family, keeping the dark truth a secret to protect Bianca. Bianca and Lorenzo had stolen the rest of the money, completely unaware of the monsters circling their family name. This time, Cherry wouldn't pay the debt. She wouldn't shield them. Quickly dressing in a pair of worn jeans and an oversized gray sweater, Cherry grabbed her purse and slipped out of the apartment. She navigated the bustling, smog-filled streets of downtown Chicago, the crisp, autumn air biting at her cheeks. She walked 3 blocks to the small, grimy corner bodega owned by Old Man Jenkins. The bell above the door chimed a cheerful tune, that contrasted sharply with the stale smell of old coffee and cigarette smoke inside. Jenkins looked up from his crossword puzzle, offering a gap-toothed smile. "Morning, Cherry." "The usual?" he croaked, reaching for the cheap brand of instant coffee she usually bought. "Not today, Mr. Jenkins," Cherry replied, her voice steady. She pulled a crisp $20 bill from her wallet, her tip money, from the diner. "Just one Mega Millions ticket, please." Jenkins raised an eyebrow. "Feeling lucky, kid?" "You have no idea," Cherry said softly. She took the small paper slip from the machine and meticulously filled in the bubbles. 04, 12, 19, 28, 33. Powerball. 07. The numbers were burned into her brain for eternity. She handed the slip back to Jenkins, watching as the machine printed the official ticket. The heavy cardstock felt like a loaded weapon in her palm. After thanking the old man, she purchased a second ticket, a random quick pick, and walked back to her apartment. The trap needed to be set with absolute precision. Bianca wasn't a criminal mastermind, but she was cunning and intensely observant. If Cherry left the ticket out in the open, Bianca would suspect a setup. It had to look like a desperate, protective hiding spot. Back in her bedroom, Cherry pulled a worn, leather-bound journal from under her mattress. She had used it in her past life to hide the ticket, knowing Bianca often snooped through her things when looking for loose cash. Cherry carefully tucked the winning ticket between the pages of a deeply personal entry about her insecurities regarding Lorenzo. Then, she left the journal jutting out just a fraction of an inch from beneath the mattress. She took the second ticket, the useless quick pick, and placed it inside her wallet. Now, all she had to do was play her part. Evening fell over the city, painting the cramped apartment in shadows. The front door unlocked with a loud clatter, and Bianca strutted in, her high heels clicking aggressively against the cheap laminate flooring. She was wearing a stunning crimson dress that Cherry knew had been purchased with one of Cherry's maxed-out credit cards. Bianca's blonde hair was perfectly styled, her lips painted a glossy ruby red. "Cherry, I'm starving. Tell me you cooked," Bianca demanded, dropping her expensive knockoff designer bag onto the small dining table. Footsteps echoed behind her, and Lorenzo walked in. He looked as handsome as ever, with his dark hair swept back and his tailored charcoal suit fitting him perfectly. Seeing him sent a physical jolt of nausea through Cherry's stomach, but she forced her facial muscles to relax into a warm, welcoming smile. "I made lasagna," Cherry said, gesturing to the kitchen counter. "It's keeping warm in the oven." Lorenzo walked over and kissed Cherry on the cheek. His lips felt like ice against her skin. "You're an angel, Chloe. Long day at the office. I missed you." Lies. All of it. Cherry knew that Lorenzo and Bianca had spent the afternoon at a luxury hotel downtown, charging room service to yet another account in Cherry's name. In her past life, she had been entirely blind to their lingering glances and subtle physical brushes. Now, looking at them, it was sickeningly obvious. The way Lorenzo's hand brushed against Bianca's waist as he reached for a plate, the knowing smirk Bianca flashed him when Cherry turned her back. Dinner was a masterclass in psychological endurance. Cherry chewed her food mechanically, playing the role of the exhausted, subservient sister and the loving fiancé. "So, any plans for tomorrow night?" Lorenzo asked, pouring himself a glass of cheap wine. "It's the big drawing, 50 million. Everyone at the firm is talking about it." "I bought a ticket," Cherry said, keeping her eyes glued to her plate. She let a small, nervous tremble enter her voice. I have a really good feeling about this one. I even hid it so I wouldn't lose it." Bianca's ears practically twitched. She paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. "You bought a ticket? Since when do you waste money on the lottery, Cherry? We can barely afford rent this month." "It's just $2, B," Cherry replied defensively. "And like I said, I have a good feeling. I put it somewhere safe. If I win, everything changes for us." Bianca rolled her eyes, but Cherry saw the greedy calculation flashing in her sister's pale blue eyes. "Sure, sweetie. Keep dreaming. I'm going to go touch up my makeup. Lorenzo, be a dear and pour me another glass." As Bianca strutted down the narrow hallway toward the bathroom, which was right next to Cherry's bedroom, Cherry began counting in her head. 1, 2, 3. "I should help you clean up," Lorenzo offered, though he made no move to stand. "No, it's fine. I've got it," Cherry insisted, standing up and gathering the plates. She moved slowly, ensuring the clattering of dishes provided enough cover noise. Down the hall, the bathroom door clicked shut, but Cherry knew Bianca wasn't inside. Quietly wiping her hands on a dish towel, Cherry crept toward the hallway and peeked around the corner. Bianca's silhouette was visible in Cherry's bedroom. The older sister moved with practiced stealth. She went straight for the bed, slipping her hand under the mattress. Cherry watched, holding her breath, as Bianca pulled out the leather journal. Flipping through the pages, Bianca's face lit up in the dim light of the street lamp outside. She pulled out the winning ticket. For a second, she just stared at it. Then, with a sly, malevolent grin, she reached into her own cleavage and pulled out a folded slip of paper, a discarded, losing ticket from weeks ago. Bianca swapped the tickets, placing the old one into Cherry's journal and shoving the journal back under the mattress. The winning ticket disappeared into the bodice of her crimson dress. Cherry stepped back into the kitchen, a genuine smile finally touching her lips. The bait had been taken. The poison was swallowed. The next evening was a chaotic symphony of fake tension. Cherry sat cross-legged on the faded living room rug, staring at the ancient box television. Lorenzo sat on the sofa behind her, texting furiously on his phone. Bianca was pacing the room, aggressively chewing on her manicured thumbnail. "They're about to announce the numbers," Cherry whispered, pulling the fake ticket from her pocket. Her hands shook, simulating perfect anxiety. The cheerful lottery host appeared on the screen, standing next to the glowing plastic sphere, filled with numbered ping-pong balls. "Here we go, folks, for $50 million, the host boomed. The first ball popped up. 4, Cherry gasped. 12. Cherry let out a shaky breath, her eyes widening. 19. 28. 33. Tears of manufactured joy sprang to Cherry's eyes. She turned to Lorenzo, her face flushed. Lorenzo, those are my numbers. I swear it. And the Powerball is 7. I won, Cherry screamed, jumping up from the rug. Oh my God, I won! $50 million. Lorenzo dropped his phone, his jaw unhinging. Cherry, are you serious? Let me see the ticket. Cherry eagerly handed him the slip of paper she had retrieved from her journal. Lorenzo stared at it, his brow furrowing in deep confusion. The air in the room suddenly grew intensely thick. Cherry, Lorenzo said slowly, his voice dripping with condescension. These aren't the numbers. What? Cherry snatched the ticket back. She stared at the numbers. 11, 24, 39, 41, 55. No, this is impossible. I bought the right numbers. I wrote them down. Mr. Jenkins printed them. Bianca stepped forward, snatching the ticket from Cherry's hands. She looked at it and let out a harsh, cruel bark of laughter. You idiot. You probably grabbed an old ticket from your purse. God, Cherry, you actually made me think we were rich for a second. But I put it in my journal, Cherry cried, sinking to her knees and burying her face in her hands. She forced deep, heaving sobs from her chest. I know I bought the winning numbers. Someone must have switched it. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Bianca scoffed, rolling her eyes. She turned away from Cherry, but not before Cherry caught the triumphant, feverish gleam in her sister's eyes. Bianca patted her chest, right where the real ticket lay hidden against her skin. It's just a stupid fantasy. Grow up, Cherry. You're never going to be rich. Lorenzo awkwardly patted Cherry on the shoulder. It's okay, babe. Honest mistake. But he was already pulling away from her, his eyes locking with Bianca's over Cherry's sobbing form. The silent communication between them was deafening. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully ruined her. They had no idea that they had just dug their own graves. Monday morning arrived with a torrential downpour, washing the grime of the city streets into the overflowing gutters. Cherry sat alone at the small dining table, sipping her black coffee. The apartment was dead quiet. Bianca hadn't come home the previous night. Neither had Lorenzo. Cherry opened her cheap laptop and navigated to the local news station's live feed. She didn't have to wait long. At exactly 9 a.m., the broadcast cut away from the weather report to a live press conference at the state lottery headquarters. The screen displayed a podium surrounded by flashing cameras and eager reporters. Standing at the center, looking like a triumphant queen ascending her throne, was Bianca Mitchell. She was wearing a brand new designer trench coat and oversized sunglasses, which she dramatically removed as the cameras flashed. Lorenzo stood slightly behind her, looking utterly smug, wearing a tailored suit that definitely hadn't been in his closet the day before. Miss Mitchell, Miss Mitchell, a reporter shouted over the din. How does it feel to be Chicago's newest multimillionaire? Bianca leaned into the microphone, flashing a brilliant, capped-tooth smile. It feels like destiny. I've always known I was meant for greater things. This money is just the universe, finally recognizing my potential. Do you have any immediate plans for the $50 million? Another reporter asked. Oh, definitely. Bianca laughed, a shrill, grating sound. I'll be moving out of the slums, for one. I'm starting my own production company to fund my acting career. And, of course, I'll be taking care of the people who truly matter to me. She reached back and pulled Lorenzo forward, linking her arm through his. Cherry watched the screen, her expression entirely neutral. In her past life, watching them publicly humiliate and discard her would have broken her heart into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Now, it only fueled her satisfaction. The betrayal was swift and absolute. Less than an hour after the broadcast ended, Cherry's cell phone buzzed. It was a text from Lorenzo. Cherry, I think you saw the news. Bianca and I have been in love for a long time. We couldn't hide it anymore. Please have your things packed and out of the apartment by Friday. Bianca bought the building this morning and she wants to renovate. Don't try to contact us. Cherry let out a genuine, breathy laugh. She typed back a single word. Okay. Bianca didn't just claim the money. She flaunted it with reckless, intoxicating abandon. Over the next 48 hours, Bianca's face was plastered across every tabloid and local news station. She bought a massive 10,000-square-foot penthouse in the Gold Coast neighborhood. She purchased matching matte black Lamborghinis for herself and Lorenzo. She threw a lavish, champagne-soaked party at a high-end club, ensuring that the paparazzi captured every decadent moment. She wanted the whole world to know she was rich, and the whole world was watching, including the people who dwelled in the city's darkest, most unforgiving shadows. Wednesday night, Cherry had already moved her meager belongings into a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city, using the last of her savings. She sat in the darkness of her room, eating lukewarm takeout noodles, her eyes fixed on the television screen. The entertainment news anchor was breathlessly detailing Bianca's latest shopping spree when his earpiece beeped. His expression shifted from cheerful gossip to grim seriousness. We interrupt this broadcast with breaking news coming out of the Gold Coast, the anchor said, his tone dropping an octave. Police are currently responding to a hostage situation at the newly purchased penthouse of lottery winner Bianca Mitchell. Details are scarce, but eyewitnesses report seeing several heavily armed men in black tactical gear entering the building approximately 20 minutes ago. Gunshots have been heard. Cherry set her noodle box down on the wobbly nightstand. She reached for the remote and turned the volume up. A live helicopter shot filled the screen, showing the sleek, glass-paned roof of Bianca's penthouse. Red and blue police lights flashed in the streets below, reflecting off the wet pavement. Victor Rossi didn't waste time. He wasn't a man who sent polite collection notices. When Arthur Mitchell had died, owing the syndicate $10 million, Rossi had frozen the debt, knowing the destitute daughters couldn't pay. But the moment a Mitchell claimed $50 million on live television, the grace period violently expired. $10 million in principal, plus 7 years of compounded underground interest. They would take every cent Bianca had, and likely her blood as a penalty for the delay. In the penthouse, absolute terror had taken hold. Bianca was shoved to her knees on the imported Italian marble floor, her face bruised, her expensive silk dress torn at the shoulder. Lorenzo was curled into a pathetic, whimpering ball a few feet away, clutching his bleeding nose. Standing over them was a mountain of a man in a tailored black suit. Victor Rossi's top lieutenant, a man known simply as the Butcher. I don't understand, Bianca sobbed hysterically, blood dripping from her split lip onto the pristine marble. Take the cars, take the jewelry. Please, just don't kill us. The Butcher crouched down, grabbing a fistful of Bianca's perfectly styled hair and yanking her head back. You think we're burglars, little bird. We don't want your trinkets. Your father owed Mr. Rossi $10 million. With the penalty and interest over the last 7 years, the current balance is $32 million, payable immediately. Bianca's eyes rolled wildly in her head. My father? No, he died. He didn't have anything. I don't know anything about a debt. Ignorance isn't an excuse in our business, the Butcher growled, pressing the cold steel barrel of a silenced pistol against Bianca's cheek. You paraded yourself on television. You showed Mr. Rossi that the Mitchell family has the funds. So, you're going to open your banking app right now, and you're going to authorize a wire transfer to our offshore holding account. $32 million. I don't have it all liquid, Bianca screamed, panic completely shattering her sanity. I spent millions already. I bought this house, the cars. The taxes took half of the winnings. I only have $20 million left in the bank. I swear. The Butcher's eyes went dead. He slowly stood up, aiming the gun down at her. That is a very unfortunate math problem for you, Miss Mitchell. Mr. Rossi expects $32 million. If you can only provide 20, we will have to extract the remaining $12 million in flesh. Lorenzo suddenly scrambled to his knees, his hands clasped together in desperate prayer. Wait. It's her money. I'm just her fiancé. I have nothing to do with her father. Let me go, please. I'll never say a word. Bianca stared at Lorenzo, betrayal ripping through her chest like the knife she had used on her sister in another lifetime. Lorenzo, you coward! You promised you loved me. I love being alive more, Lorenzo shrieked, backing away toward the elevator. The butcher didn't even look at Lorenzo. He just casually raised his left hand, and one of his masked men stepped forward, swinging the butt of a heavy rifle straight into Lorenzo's jaw. The sickening crack of bone echoed through the penthouse. Lorenzo collapsed, unconscious, in a pool of his own blood. "Wire the 20 million," the butcher commanded Bianca. "Then, my men are going to take you for a very long ride. You're going to work off the remaining 12 million, however long it takes." As Bianca sobbed, her trembling, blood-stained fingers frantically typing in her bank credentials, she finally realized the magnitude of her fatal mistake. The money wasn't a blessing. It was a curse, a death sentence wrapped in gold, and she had stolen it right out from under her sister. Back in the rundown motel room, Cherry watched the news anchor announce that an ambulance was arriving at the scene. She took a slow, calm sip of her water. The storm outside raged on, but inside Cherry's mind, the skies were finally, perfectly clear. Morning arrived in Chicago with a cold, unforgiving frost that mirrored the sudden, brutal end of Bianca Mitchell's reign. News anchors scrambled to piece together the chaotic events of the previous night. The official police statement reported a violent home invasion at the Gold Coast penthouse. Blood was found on the imported marble, along with a shattered cell phone and a discarded designer heel. But the victims had vanished completely. The media spun wild theories, ranging from a targeted cartel kidnapping to an elaborate hoax orchestrated by Bianca to avoid paying taxes. Cherry watched the circus unfold from the sterile confines of her motel room. She felt no guilt, no remorse, and certainly no pity. In her previous life, she had bled out on a hardwood floor, betrayed by the two people she had loved most, while they callously stepped over her corpse to claim her fortune. The universe had simply course-corrected. Turning off the television, Cherry reached into her cheap canvas tote bag and pulled out her worn wallet. The trap she had set for Bianca had required 2 tickets. The first was the winning set of numbers, meticulously memorized from her past life and placed inside the journal. The second was a randomized quick pick she had purchased to provide cover, currently folded inside the leather compartment of her wallet. She had almost thrown it away, but an inexplicable itch at the back of her mind compelled her to open her laptop and bring up the state lottery's official website. Cherry smoothed the wrinkled paper against the desk. She read the secondary prize tiers. The grand prize of 50 million had been claimed by the doomed Bianca, but there was a second-tier prize for matching all 5 white balls without the Powerball. Her eyes darted between the screen and the ticket. 11, 24, 39, 41, 55, Powerball, 14. The winning numbers for the grand prize had been 04, 12, 19, 28, 33. However, Cherry was looking at the secondary draw, the one that ran concurrently for a smaller pool. She checked the numbers on the screen. 11, 24, 39, 41, 55. Cherry's breath hitched in her throat. Her hands began to shake, not with the manufactured panic she had displayed for Lorenzo and Bianca, but with genuine, earth-shattering shock. The quick pick ticket was a winner. It wasn't $50 million. It was exactly $1 million. Tears finally spilled over her eyelashes, hot and heavy. The universe hadn't just allowed her to execute her revenge. It had handed her a clean, quiet slate. $1 million was a life-changing amount of money for a diner waitress. But it wasn't enough to make headlines. It wasn't enough to attract the attention of Victor Rossi and his underground syndicate. It was invisible money. It was freedom. She didn't rush to the lottery headquarters with a camera crew in tow. Instead, Cherry spent the next 3 days meticulously researching asset protection. She found a reputable, high-end law firm in downtown Chicago that specialized in wealth management and anonymity, sitting across from a silver-haired attorney named Harrison Ford, a name that briefly made her smile. Despite the tension, Cherry outlined her demands. "I need to claim this anonymously, Mr. Ford," Cherry said, sliding the endorsed ticket across the polished mahogany desk. "I want to establish a blind trust. The money needs to be completely untraceable to my legal name. I am moving out of state, and I want zero digital footprint connecting me to this payout." Harrison inspected the ticket, his expression professional and unreadable. "$1 million is a substantial sum, Miss Mitchell. Establishing a trust, let's call it the Phoenix Trust, will cost a percentage, but it guarantees absolute privacy under Illinois law. Your name will never appear in a public registry, nor will it be printed on a giant cardboard check." "That is exactly what I am paying you for," Cherry replied firmly. The legal process took 2 weeks. During that time, Cherry lived like a ghost. She changed her phone number, deleted all her social media accounts, and paid for everything in cash. Every time she walked down the street, she kept her head down, highly aware that Rossi's men were still prowling the city, cleaning up the loose ends of the Mitchell family debt. But they were looking for a glamorous, multi-millionaire sister, not a dowdy waitress in an oversized gray sweater. When the funds finally cleared, minus taxes and legal fees, Cherry had approximately $600,000 sitting in a secure, encrypted account. Packing her single suitcase, Cherry booked a one-way train ticket out of Illinois. She didn't look back at the skyline as the train rattled away from the station. The city of Chicago held nothing but ghosts and blood. She was heading west to Denver, Colorado. The crisp mountain air and the promise of anonymity called to her. Upon arriving in Denver, Cherry immediately set to work building her fortress. She purchased a small, modest, yet beautifully renovated 2-bedroom house in a quiet suburban neighborhood under the name of her LLC. She didn't buy designer clothes or luxury cars. She bought peace of mind. With a portion of the remaining capital, she invested in a struggling but charming independent bookstore and cafe near a local university. She revamped the menu, restocked the shelves, and poured her soul into the business. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, Cherry Mitchell was her own boss. No one was demanding her wages. No one was draining her bank accounts. No one was lying to her. Months bled into a year. The cafe, cleverly named The Second Chapter, thrived beyond her wildest expectations. Cherry became a beloved figure in her local community, known for her sharp wit, her incredible espresso, and her calm, unflappable demeanor. She had successfully rewritten her destiny. But karma, Cherry would soon learn, had a strange way of bringing the past full circle, just to prove that the ledger was truly balanced. 18 months after the disastrous events in the Chicago penthouse, the harsh winter finally gave way to a brilliant Colorado spring. Cherry was wiping down the mahogany counter of her cafe, humming softly to the jazz playing through the overhead speakers. The afternoon rush had died down, leaving only a few college students quietly typing on their laptops in the plush corner booths. The bell above the heavy glass door chimed. Cherry didn't immediately look up, focused on perfectly aligning the display of freshly baked scones. Welcome to the second chapter. I'll be right with you. A shuffling, heavy set of footsteps approached the counter. The smell hit Cherry before she even raised her head. A pungent mixture of stale alcohol, unwashed clothes, and raw desperation. "Excuse me, miss. Do you have any day-old bread? Or maybe a coffee you were going to throw out?" A raspy, slurred voice asked. Cherry looked up, an automatic polite smile forming on her lips. The smile froze instantly, hardening into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Standing on the other side of her counter was a man who looked like he had been chewed up and spat out by a wood chipper. He was hunched over, his clothes nothing but filthy rags hanging off a severely emaciated frame. His dark hair was matted with grease and dirt, but it was his face that was the most horrifying. His jaw was entirely crooked, healed poorly from a devastating, untreated fracture, leaving his mouth permanently twisted into a grotesque, lopsided grimace. A thick, ugly scar ran from his left ear down to his collarbone. Despite the ruin, despite the filth, and the broken posture, Cherry recognized those eyes. They were the same eyes that had coldly checked a Rolex watch while she bled to death in her past life. It was Lorenzo. Lorenzo didn't recognize her. How could he? The woman standing before him was radiant, healthy, and exuded quiet authority. She wore a tailored linen apron over a crisp white blouse, her hair cut into a chic, shoulder-length bob. She looked nothing like the exhausted, beaten-down waitress he had betrayed, nor the weeping, pathetic victim he had mocked on the night of the lottery drawing. "Please, miss," Lorenzo croaked, his crooked jaw making his speech wet and difficult to understand. "I haven't eaten in 2 days. Just a piece of bread." Cherry stood perfectly still. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. A million thoughts raced through her mind. She could scream. She could call the police. She could lean over the counter and whisper her name, watching the terror dawn in his eyes. Instead, a profound, heavy wave of calm washed over her. He was already destroyed. The universe had exacted a toll far worse than anything she could have inflicted. "Wait here," Cherry said, her voice smooth and devoid of any emotion. She turned and walked into the back kitchen. She prepared a large to-go box, filling it with fresh roasted chicken, roasted potatoes, and a thick slice of sourdough bread. She poured a large cup of hot, black coffee. Walking back to the counter, she placed the food and the coffee in front of him. Lorenzo's eyes widened with pathetic gratitude. His trembling, dirt-caked hands reached for the box. "Thank you. God bless you, miss. You have no idea what this means. I used to be someone, you know. I was going to be a millionaire. I was engaged to a beautiful woman." Cherry leaned slightly against the counter, resting her chin on her hand. "What happened to her?" Lorenzo flinched violently, as if physically struck by the question. He clutched the warm box of food to his chest, his eyes darting around the quiet cafe, as if expecting armed men to jump from the shadows. She made a mistake," Lorenzo whispered, his voice cracking. "She paraded money that wasn't hers to keep. Bad men came. They hit me with a rifle, broke my face. When I woke up, I was in an alley. They took everything. The police thought I was involved, so I had to run. I've been running ever since." "And your fiancé?" Cherry pressed gently, her tone completely detached. Lorenzo let out a hollow, broken laugh that turned into a wet cough. "Bianca, they didn't kill her. That would have been too kind. I hear things on the street. The syndicate doesn't waste assets. She's working off a $30 million debt in a basement casino in Macau, dealing cards for 20 hours a day. If she drops a chip, they take a finger. She'll never see daylight again. A cold, absolute finality settled into Cherry's bones. The ledger was closed. The debt of her past life had been paid in full by the very people who had incurred it. Lorenzo took a sip of the coffee, wincing as the hot liquid hit his ruined jaw. "Thank you again, miss. You're a good person." Cherry looked at the pathetic, broken man shivering in her beautiful warm cafe. She felt completely, wonderfully empty of him. "Take the food and go," Cherry said, her voice dropping to a low, authoritative register that finally made Lorenzo freeze. "And do not ever come back to this cafe." Lorenzo looked up, confused by the sudden, freezing shift in her demeanor. He stared into her hazel eyes for a long, agonizing second. A flicker of something crossed his face, a shadow of a memory, a terrifying spark of recognition. His breathing hitched, his eyes widening in absolute horror as the realization slowly dawned on him. But Cherry didn't give him the chance to speak. She simply turned her back on him and walked toward the espresso machine, entirely dismissing his existence. She heard the frantic, scrambling sound of Lorenzo backing away, the door chiming wildly as he practically threw himself out onto the street, fleeing from the ghost of the woman he had murdered in another lifetime. Cherry picked up a pristine white rag and polished the steam wand of the espresso machine. The afternoon sun filtered through the large front windows, casting a warm, golden glow across the immaculate counters of the second chapter. She took a deep breath, savoring the smell of roasted coffee beans and old books. She was alive. She was free. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, the future belonged entirely to her. Paranoia crawled beneath Lorenzo's skin like a swarm of hungry insects as he bolted down the Denver alleyway. Clutching the styrofoam box of food as if it were a literal lifeline, his mind spun in violent, chaotic circles. Cherry was alive. Cherry was thriving. And most damning of all, Cherry had looked at him with the cold, detached eyes of someone who held every single card in the deck. Reaching a filthy, improvised encampment beneath the Interstate 25 overpass, Lorenzo collapsed onto a stained mattress, tearing into the roasted chicken like a feral animal. The pieces of the puzzle violently snapped together in his ruined mind. Bianca had cashed the $50 million ticket, drawing the immediate wrath of Victor Rossi. But Cherry hadn't just disappeared. She had established a lucrative business, looking impeccably groomed, and entirely unbothered by the loss of her supposed fortune. "She knew," Lorenzo rasped to the empty air, grease dripping down his chin. "She knew about Arthur Mitchell's gambling debt to the Rossi syndicate. She set the trap." Rage, hot and blinding, temporarily burned away his paralyzing fear. Cherry had intentionally handed them a death sentence while walking away cleanly into a new life. Staring at his crooked, unhealed jaw, reflected in a puddle of stagnant water, Lorenzo decided he wasn't going to rot in the gutters, while his ex-fiancée lived a life of cozy luxury. If he could contact the syndicate, if he could offer them the true mastermind who had orchestrated the public humiliation of their operation, perhaps Victor Rossi would grant him clemency. Better yet, if he could extort Cherry directly, threatening to expose her location to the Chicago mob, she would have to empty whatever secret Fidelity investments or Charles Schwab accounts she had stashed away. Survival demanded ruthless action. Dragging himself up from the mattress, Lorenzo limped toward the bustling commercial district, near Denver's historic Union Station. Blending into the shadows, he watched a distracted businessman set his expensive smartphone on a cafe table. Moving with the desperate speed of a starving predator, Lorenzo snatched the device and vanished back into the labyrinth of side streets before the man even noticed it was gone. Hiding behind a dumpster, Lorenzo unlocked the phone and dialed a Chicago area code he had prayed never to use again. The line rang 3 times before a gravelly, terrifyingly calm voice answered. "Speak. It's Lorenzo James," he stammered, his crooked jaw making the words slosh together. "I have information from Mr. Rossi about the Mitchell debt, about the sister who got away." Silence stretched on the other end, thick and suffocating. Finally, the man spoke. "You have exactly 10 seconds to make this interesting, James, before I trace this signal and have my associates in Colorado peel off your skin." "Cherry Mitchell set the whole thing up," Lorenzo cried frantically. "She knew about the debt. She gave Bianca the ticket on purpose to take the fall. And she's hiding money. I found her in Denver. She owns a business. If you clear my name, I'll give you her exact location." Another agonizing pause. "Victor Rossi doesn't care about a minor sister holding a few pennies." The voice replied smoothly. "Bianca Mitchell's $50 million covered the penalty. The ledger is settled, but Mr. Rossi does not appreciate being used as an assassination tool by a lowly waitress. We will send someone to verify this claim. Stay put." The line went dead. Lorenzo exhaled a shaky breath, a twisted, grotesque smile forming on his face. The wheels were in motion. Across town, inside the quiet sanctuary of the second chapter, Cherry was far from ignorant of the impending storm. As soon as Lorenzo had fled the cafe, she had locked the front doors and flipped the sign to closed. Retreating to her private back office, she immediately logged into her secure banking portal, confirming that her anonymous assets remained untouched. Preparation was the only difference between a victim and a survivor. Cherry picked up her desk phone and dialed the direct line of Thomas Remington, a highly recommended, ruthlessly efficient private security contractor she had retained precisely for a moment like this. "Mr. Remington, we have a breach," Cherry said, her voice completely devoid of panic. "A ghost from Chicago just walked into my cafe. Lorenzo James. He is currently unhoused and highly desperate. I want eyes on him, and I want an armed perimeter established around my property by nightfall." "Understood, Miss Mitchell," Thomas replied crisply. "My team is en route. Should we apprehend him?" "No," Cherry instructed softly. "Let him think he has the upper hand. He is a coward by nature. He will try to strike when he believes I am vulnerable. I want him to walk right into his own grave." Hanging up the phone, Cherry opened the bottom drawer of her mahogany desk. Resting inside a velvet-lined lockbox was a sleek, fully loaded Glock 19. She had spent countless hours at the firing range over the past year, ensuring she would never again be utterly defenseless. Taking the weapon out, she racked the slide with a satisfying, metallic clack. Darkness descended over the Rocky Mountains, casting long, jagged shadows across the quiet suburban streets of Denver. The cafe was completely dark, the neon open sign extinguished hours ago. Outside, a bitter wind howled down the avenues, rattling the street lamps. Creeping through the back alley, Lorenzo gripped a heavy iron crowbar he had scavenged from a construction site. The syndicate had told him to wait, but his frantic, deteriorating mind refused to sit still. He wanted Cherry's money now. He wanted to see the terror in her eyes when she realized her perfect little sanctuary had been violently breached. If he could secure her cash reserves tonight, he could flee the country entirely, escaping both the police and Victor Rossi's enforcers. Approaching the rear delivery door of the bookstore, Lorenzo wedged the crowbar into the steel frame. With a violent jerk, the old locking mechanism groaned and snapped. The door swung open, revealing the pitch-black storage room. Silence greeted his intrusion. No alarms blared, no sirens wailed in the distance. Lorenzo smirked, his confidence swelling. Cherry was just a stupid waitress, completely ignorant of real danger. Navigating through the stacks of cardboard boxes filled with unread novels, Lorenzo stepped onto the polished hardwood floor of the main cafe area. Moonlight spilled through the large front windows, illuminating the pristine espresso machine and the neatly arranged pastry displays. He moved toward the back office, convinced that Cherry kept a safe containing the cash from the business. "You always were remarkably predictable, Lorenzo." The voice echoed from the shadows of a large leather reading chair situated in the corner of the room. Lorenzo froze, the crowbar slipping slightly in his sweaty palms. A single, small reading lamp clicked on, casting a sharp pool of light. Cherry sat perfectly relaxed in the chair, a steaming cup of tea resting on the table beside her. Her legs were casually crossed. Resting comfortably in her lap, pointed directly at Lorenzo's chest, was the Glock 19. "Cherry," Lorenzo gasped, taking a hesitant step backward. You knew I was coming. Thomas Remington and his security team have been watching you since you stole that cell phone near Union Station," Cherry stated calmly, taking a sip of her tea. "I know you called Chicago. I know you tried to sell me out to the syndicate. Unfortunately for you, Victor Rossi's men aren't coming to Denver. They verified that Bianca's assets covered the debt. They told you to stay put simply because they enjoy watching rats scurry in a maze." Lorenzo's chest to heave, his eyes darting frantically toward the broken back door. "I just want money, Cherry. Give me the cash in the safe, and I'll disappear. I swear it. I won't ever bother you again." "Money," Cherry laughed, a cold, hollow sound that sent shivers down Lorenzo's spine. "You ruined your entire existence for money. You watched Bianca steal $50 million from me, and you thought you had secured your future. Look at you now. You are a broken, pathetic creature." Desperation finally shattered the last remnants of Lorenzo's sanity. He raised the crowbar, a feral snarl twisting his scarred face. "You did this to me. You set us up. You handed us over to the mob. I simply gave you exactly what you wanted," Cherry replied, her tone dropping to an icy whisper. She slowly stood up, keeping the weapon perfectly leveled. "But you see, Lorenzo, I owe you something far more personal." Lorenzo paused, confused by the intense, burning hatred radiating from her hazel eyes. "Do you still check your Rolex, Lorenzo?" Cherry asked, stepping out of the pool of light and into the shadows. "Do you still check the time while a woman bleeds out on your expensive mahogany floor?" The crowbar clattered loudly onto the hardwood. Lorenzo's knees buckled, his mind violently rejecting the words he was hearing. How could you know about the Rolex?" he whispered, true, primal terror gripping his throat. "I lost that watch before the lottery. I never..." Before the knife pierced my ribs, I looked right at you," Cherry continued, her voice echoing like a supernatural judgment in the empty cafe. "I watched you stand there, completely indifferent to my murder. You and Bianca killed me, Lorenzo. In another life, another timeline, you murdered me for that money, and I came back solely to ensure you experienced hell on earth." Lorenzo scrambled backward on his hands and knees, weeping uncontrollably. He wasn't looking at a former waitress anymore. He was staring at a vengeful phantom, a demon draped in human skin who possessed memories of events that had never truly happened, yet somehow governed his entire reality. "Please," he sobbed, pressing his back against the pastry display case. "Please, I'm sorry. I don't understand, but I'm sorry. Don't shoot me." "Shoot you?" Cherry asked, feigning surprise. She lowered the gun. "Why would I soil my beautiful cafe with your blood? I told you earlier today. You are already destroyed." Right on cue, the blinding glare of red and blue police lights flooded through the front windows, instantly illuminating the entire bookstore. Heavy boots pounded against the pavement outside. "Drop the weapon and put your hands on the glass." A megaphone blared from the street. Cherry swiftly placed the handgun onto the nearby table and raised her hands, maintaining a perfectly calm expression. She looked down at Lorenzo, who was violently shaking, utterly trapped like an animal in a cage. Breaking and entering, attempted robbery, and multiple outstanding felony warrants from Chicago. Cherry listed softly, her eyes locking onto his terrified gaze. "You will be extradited to an Illinois maximum security prison by the end of the week. Do you know who controls the cell blocks in Illinois, Lorenzo?" Lorenzo's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated horror. "Victor Rossi's syndicate. They take their debts very seriously," Cherry whispered, offering him one final, chilling smile. "And they hate loose ends." The front doors burst open, and a swarm of armed police officers stormed into the building. Lorenzo didn't fight back. He simply curled into a pathetic ball on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably as the cold steel handcuffs snapped around his wrists, finally realizing that the true cost of his greed was a nightmare from which he would never, ever wake up. Cold steel slammed shut with a reverberating echo that signaled the absolute end of Lorenzo James's freedom. Stateville Correctional Center in Joliet, Illinois, was not a place designed for rehabilitation. It was a sprawling, concrete tomb constructed for the damned. The harsh reality of his situation had begun to set in during processing, a humiliating blur of degrading strip searches, harsh chemical showers, and the issuance of a scratchy, oversized orange jumpsuit that swallowed his emaciated frame. Now, sitting on a paper-thin mattress in a cell that smelled eternally of industrial bleach and human despair, the sheer magnitude of his nightmare finally crushed whatever fragile, delusional hope he had left. Warden James Comey had read Lorenzo's intake file with a thinly veiled, disgusted sneer. The charges were heavy: attempted robbery, fleeing prosecution, and a glaring, undeniable implication of mob ties due to his association with the Mitchell lottery scandal. Because of his high-profile flight risk, Lorenzo was immediately tossed into the maximum security general population block. What the warden didn't formally acknowledge, but what every guard and inmate knew as absolute law, was that Cell Block D was entirely controlled by the Rossi Syndicate. Dinner time arrived with a harsh, mechanical buzzer that rattled Lorenzo's teeth. He shuffled out of his cell and into the cavernous cafeteria, his unhealed, crooked jaw throbbing violently as his eyes darted frantically around the massive room. Hundreds of hardened men in orange ate in a deafening cacophony of shouting and clattering metal. Lorenzo kept his head bowed, holding a plastic tray of unrecognizable gray slop. Finding an empty spot at the very edge of a rusted metal table, he hunched his shoulders, desperately trying to make himself entirely invisible to the predators circling the room. "James," a voice, thick with a heavy Chicago accent and dripping with lethal authority, sliced flawlessly through the chaotic din of the mess hall. Looking up, Lorenzo felt his stomach drop into a bottomless, freezing abyss. 3 massive inmates had surrounded his table, completely blocking his escape. The man in the center, heavily tattooed with the unmistakable, intricate insignia of Victor Rossi's underground empire scaling his thick neck, sat down directly across from him. This was Dominic Santoro, a ruthless enforcer serving 20 years for racketeering, and the undisputed king of the block. "Word travels fast on the inside, Lorenzo," Dominic whispered, leaning forward so close that Lorenzo could smell the stale chewing tobacco on his breath. "Mr. Rossi sends his warmest regards from the Gold Coast. He was quite disappointed to hear you were causing trouble in Denver for a young woman who has already settled her family's accounts. Mr. Rossi values good bookkeeping, and he violently despises rats who try to sell out civilians to save their own pathetic skins." "I didn't. I swear to God, I didn't mean any disrespect," Lorenzo stammered, tears immediately welling in his eyes as he clutched his plastic spoon like a useless, pathetic weapon. "Please, I have nothing left. Cherry took it all from us. She set the trap." "That is exactly right." Dominic smiled, revealing a chilling, dead expression that didn't reach his cold, reptilian eyes. "She played the game, and she won. You played the game, and you exposed our operation to a federal media circus. You thought you were a player, James. You thought you could swim with the sharks just because you stole a shiny lottery ticket. But you have nothing left to offer the world except a bloody example of what happens when you cross the Rossi family. Finish your slop, because tomorrow morning you're assigned to laundry duty in the basement. And tragic, fatal accidents with those heavy, industrial presses happen all the time. Thousands of miles away, completely removed from the suffocating dread and impending violence of the Chicago penitentiary system, Cherry Mitchell sat comfortably in her private office. Her cafe was closed for a private inventory count. The quiet, soulful jazz music providing a soothing backdrop to her meticulous financial bookkeeping. The Rocky Mountain wind howled softly outside, a stark contrast to the perfect warmth radiating from her space heater. A sleek, jet-black Mercedes-Benz S-Class idled quietly at the back alley entrance of the bookstore. A moment later, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed from the reinforced steel door. Thomas Remington, Cherry's fiercely loyal head of security, checked the live high-definition camera feed before giving a curt nod to his boss and releasing the heavy deadbolt. Stepping into the office was Harrison Ford, the silver-haired, impeccably dressed attorney who had originally set up Cherry's blind trust a year and a half ago. He removed his tailored cashmere overcoat, shaking off the light Denver snow, and took a seat across from her pristine mahogany desk, opening a slim, Italian leather briefcase. "Good evening, Miss Mitchell," Harrison greeted smoothly, his professional demeanor flawless. "Your establishment looks remarkably prosperous. I must admit, I am deeply impressed by your operational acumen. You've built quite the empire out here in the mountains." "Thank you, Harrison," Cherry replied calmly, pouring 2 glasses of sparkling water and sliding one across the polished wood surface. "Though I sincerely doubt you flew all the way from Chicago just to compliment my business model or check on my espresso machines. To what do I owe the pleasure of this unannounced visit?" Harrison took a slow, measured sip of his water, his sharp, blue eyes locking onto hers with a sudden, intense gravity. "I am here in a dual capacity tonight, Cherry. Officially, I am your wealth manager, confirming that your Phoenix Trust remains entirely impenetrable to local and federal audits. Unofficially, however, I represent a different client, a gentleman by the name of Victor Rossi. Golden afternoon sunlight streamed through the immaculate bay windows of the second chapter, entirely unbothered by the heavy, dangerous tension gripping the back office. Cherry did not flinch, nor did she instinctively reach for the loaded Glock 19 securely locked in her bottom desk drawer. She simply leaned back in her leather executive chair, steepling her fingers and maintaining absolute, terrifying eye contact with the lawyer. I was wondering how long it would take for Mr. Rossi to connect the dots, Cherry stated evenly, her voice devoid of any tremor. Given your prestigious firm's vast real estate and offshore portfolio, I should have naturally assumed you manage the legitimate financial fronts for the syndicate. Mr. Rossi is a brilliant strategist, and he employs men who notice anomalies, Harrison said, a hint of genuine admiration coloring his corporate tone. When the dust settled at the Gold Coast penthouse, and Bianca's remaining $50 million was seized to cover your father's underground debt, Mr. Rossi found the timeline of events rather fascinating. We have eyes inside the State Lottery Commission, Cherry. We saw the exact timestamp on the winning quick pick ticket. We saw the immediate LLC formation in Colorado. A destitute waitress suddenly buys a massive winning ticket on the exact same day her sister miraculously claims the grand prize. Then, that same waitress completely vanishes, establishing an airtight trust with my firm. Mr. Rossi recognized a masterful stroke of misdirection when he saw one. Reaching into his briefcase, Harrison pulled out a thick, sealed manila envelope and slid it across the mahogany surface. Mr. Rossi wants you to know that he harbors absolutely no ill will toward you. In fact, he deeply respects your utter ruthlessness. You used his violent organization as a precise weapon to execute your own vengeance, and you did it without costing him a single dime. The Mitchell family debt is permanently erased from his ledgers. You are a free woman, completely clear of his shadow. Cherry picked up the envelope, her manicured thumb effortlessly breaking the thick, red wax seal. She tipped the contents onto her desk. 2 distinct items clattered against the wood. The first was a small, heavily encrypted USB flash drive. The second was a heavy, authentic casino chip from the Grand Lisboa in Macau, stamped with a staggering denomination of 100,000 Hong Kong dollars. Consider the chip a token of professional courtesy from Mr. Rossi, Harrison explained, standing up and buttoning his expensive suit jacket. The drive contains a final piece of closure that my client felt you deserved. Your former fiancé, Lorenzo James, suffered a catastrophic, fatal accident in the Stateville laundry room early this morning. It was a closed casket situation. As for your sister, well, the video file will speak for itself. Good day, Miss Mitchell. May we never cross paths again. Goodbye, Harrison, Cherry whispered, as the lawyer exited the office, leaving her entirely alone in the quiet sanctuary she had built from the literal ashes of her own murder. Plugging the encrypted USB drive into her laptop, Cherry clicked on the single video file stored within. The screen flickered, revealing grainy, high-definition security footage from a subterranean room. The timestamp glowing in the bottom corner indicated the feed was recorded just 3 days ago. It was a windowless, smoke-filled gambling den, located deep in the darkest, most unregulated underbelly of Macau. Men in sharp suits and hardened, dangerous criminals crowded around a high-stakes VIP baccarat table. Dealing the cards with robotic, mechanical precision was a woman who looked like a hollowed-out, broken ghost of her former self. Bianca Mitchell was entirely unrecognizable. Her once luxurious, perfectly styled blonde hair was chopped unevenly to her chin, dull and stringy from a lack of basic hygiene. She wore a cheap, restrictive dealer uniform, her face completely devoid of any makeup, revealing deep, dark circles of profound exhaustion and absolute terror. As she reached forward to distribute the cards across the green felt, the camera zoomed slightly, catching a clear glimpse of her left hand. The pinky finger was missing, severed cleanly at the knuckle. A brutal, permanent reminder of a dropped chip, a miscalculated payout, or a moment of insubordination. Suddenly, Bianca slightly fumbled a card. A massive pit boss immediately stepped out of the shadows behind her, placing a heavy hand on her shoulder. Bianca flinched so violently she nearly collapsed, absolute terror radiating from her broken posture as she hastily corrected her mistake, weeping silently while the wealthy patrons ignored her suffering. Bianca's eyes stared blankly ahead, entirely dead inside. She was trapped in an endless, inescapable loop of forced servitude, sweating under the harsh fluorescent lights, working off a $30 million cartel debt that would take 3 lifetimes to repay. Every waking second of her existence was agonizing, suffocating misery. She had no name here. She had no voice. She was merely property. Cherry watched the footage in complete, meditative silence for a full 5 minutes. She watched the sister who had callously driven a 6-inch blade into her chest in a previous life, now suffering a fate exponentially worse than a quick death. The universe had balanced the scales with terrifying, poetic precision. Bianca had wanted the immense wealth, the unearned glamour, and the blinding spotlight. Instead, she had unknowingly traded her soul for a cage of eternal, inescapable torment. Closing the laptop, Cherry removed the USB drive and tossed it into the small metal wastebasket beside her desk. She struck a long wooden match, watching the bright orange flame dance for a brief second before dropping it directly onto the drive, destroying the only remaining digital link to her past. She locked the Macau casino chip inside her desk drawer, a permanent reminder to never underestimate the darkness of the world, nor her own capability to survive it. Stepping out of her office and into the bustling, vibrant front of the cafe, Cherry inhaled the rich, comforting aroma of freshly roasted espresso beans and old, leather-bound paperbacks. In the line of happy customers stretched out the door, laughing and chatting enthusiastically in the warm Colorado sunshine. She walked purposefully behind the counter, tying her tailored linen apron securely around her waist. A young college student approached the register, smiling brightly as she adjusted her backpack. "Hi, could I get a large vanilla latte and one of those amazing blueberry scones?" "Absolutely," Cherry smiled back, a genuine, radiant expression that reached all the way to her bright hazel eyes. She was no longer the tragic victim bleeding out on the hardwood floor. She was no longer the frightened, exhausted waitress hiding in the shadows of Chicago. She was Cherry Mitchell, a powerful, fiercely independent woman who had been given a miraculous second chance at life. She had ruthlessly forged her own beautiful paradise, leaving the greedy demons of her past to burn endlessly in the hell they had built for themselves. The game was definitively over, and she had won. Karma is a dish, best served, absolutely ice cold, and Cherry Mitchell just delivered a masterclass in ultimate revenge. If you loved watching Bianca and Lorenzo get exactly what they deserved after their ruthless betrayal, you have to hit that like button right now. Share this insane story of rebirth, mob justice, and karmic payback with your friends, and make sure to subscribe with notifications turned on. We bring you the most jaw-dropping, twist-filled drama stories every single week, and you definitely won't want to miss our next epic tale.